You know, every single day, whether we realize it or not, there are these invisible forces kind of pulling at our decisions, our emotions, and, well, our beliefs. It's this subtle, constant manipulation happening right under our noses.
It's a pretty startling thought, isn't it? I mean, from advertisers to politicians, these psychological techniques are being used on you all the time. But this brings up a really fascinating and maybe a little unsettling question.
Yeah, what if you could flip the script? Instead of being the puppet, what if you were the one in control? Now, this isn't just some hypothetical. It was actually the basis for a real-world experiment.
So for 48 straight hours, one person set out to consciously apply the principles of dark psychology in their everyday life. And we're going to break down exactly what they did, what happened, and maybe most importantly, what it cost them.
The goal here was brutally simple. Just test these hidden techniques out in the open and see how easily people can be influenced. And the results, well, they were shocking and, honestly, a little terrifying. Let's dive into what happened on day one.
Okay, so the experiment started small. It kicked off in a crowded coffee shop in downtown Chicago, just using some simple nonverbal cues to try and build an instant connection, and maybe gain a little bit of an advantage.
The first technique on the docket is called mirroring. Some people call it the chameleon effect. And what it does is it kind of hacks our primal instincts. By copying someone, you make yourself seem more like them. And this triggers what are called mirror neurons in their brain. It creates this unconscious bond of familiarity and trust. It's wild.
So here's how it actually went down. The subject walked up to the barista and, following these steps, first just observed her. She had this leaning posture and a really energetic tone. So the subject subtly mimicked it, matching her energy, her stance, everything. The result was immediate. I mean, look at this quote. The barista went from being completely disengaged, just doing her job, to treating the subject like an old friend and even giving them free stuff. It was a tiny little action that created this massive behavioral shift. But this was just the warm-up for the day.
Later that afternoon, in a business meeting, the experiment escalated. The next technique is way more aggressive. It's called weaponized silence. This one plays on a simple fact. Most of us are deeply uncomfortable with silence during a confrontation. We feel this urge to fill the void, and when we do, we often give up our power.
Now, what's so interesting about this is how simple it is. So when the subject was asked a tough question about a project deadline, they gave a very short answer and then just stopped. Held direct, unblinking eye contact for a full 10 seconds. Said nothing. You can just imagine the pressure in that room becoming almost unbearable for the other person.
And the outcome? It was just a masterclass in psychological pressure. The other person, unable to handle it, just started talking and talking. They over-explained, they backpedaled, and they ended up offering a better deal, literally negotiating against themselves, all because of a calculated pause. Power completely shifted without a single word of negotiation.
Okay, so that escalation on day one, from subtle influence to overt pressure, really set the stage for day two. The experiment moved away from one-on-one interactions and into a much more complex environment, a social gathering. The goal now? To control the entire dynamic of a group. The technique they used here is this powerful combination you often see in, frankly, toxic relationships. It works by making your approval a really scarce and unpredictable thing, a resource that people suddenly feel compelled to chase. So, here's the play-by-play. The subject would pull someone in, give them their full attention, make them feel like the center of the universe. Then, right when that person was hooked, they would just pull away completely, turn their back, check their phone, become cold and distant. It's the classic push-pull.
And the psychological effect was, well, immediate and totally predictable. That sudden withdrawal of validation made people anxious, but instead of just moving on, they worked harder to get that positive attention back. As the source material says, human psychology is wired to chase what is pulling away. So get this, by controlling the supply of validation, the subject basically took control of the entire social hierarchy in the room.
So the experiment was a quote-unquote success. It proved that human behavior is incredibly predictable and, let's be honest, pretty easy to hack. But this is where the story takes a much darker turn. There was a hidden cost to all this power. By the end of that second day, the subject reported feeling deeply disconnected and detached from everyone. All that constant analyzing, strategizing, and viewing people as pawns on a chessboard, it had this corrosive effect on their own mind.
This feeling is actually linked to something psychologists call the dark triad. It's a combination of 3 really toxic personality traits. First, you've got narcissism, which is an inflated sense of self-importance. Then there's Machiavellianism, a willingness to manipulate and exploit others for your own gain. And finally, psychopathy, which is a really distinct and chilling lack of empathy.
The power to influence people is absolutely real, but it clearly comes with a steep internal price. You know, you might win the game, but you could lose a piece of your own humanity in the process.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? Is this a manual for how to become a master manipulator? No, absolutely not. The real power here isn't in using these techniques. It's in being able to recognize them.
Look, the truth is, these tactics work because they bypass our logical brain, and they go straight for our subconscious. But once you understand how mirroring feels, or what weaponized silence is designed to do, or you can spot when someone is using that emotional push-pull on you, their power over you just vanishes.
And this is the whole point. This knowledge transforms you. You're no longer playing a game you didn't even know existed. You can see the mechanics at work, whether it's in a boardroom, in an advertisement, or in a personal relationship. You can finally see the strings.
Which, of course, brings us to the final question. This isn't just about passive knowledge. It's about active awareness. Now that you know what to look for, how is that going to change the way you navigate the world?